Welcome to the Bright Ideas podcast. Here we're going to unpack innovative ways to approach course design. I'm Kelsey.
And I'm Madison, and we are instructional designers at the Lone Star College Systems.
You may be thinking, what is an instructional designer? We get that question a lot. It sounds really fancy and technical, but really what we do is we help with course design. And this can be from the ground up, like here's your textbook, here are your learning objectives, go forth and build a course. But a lot of what we do on the day-to-day is actually consulting with faculty on courses that are already in flight. So we think about things like how to improve student engagement, how to bring things more into alignment, you'll hear that word a lot, and taking, these big ideas and learning outcomes and translating that into something tangible.
Right. So Kelsey and I basically came up with this podcast to really just be a resource for educators. There's all these different things with online instruction that seem really scary sometimes. And so this podcast is really going to be there to really just offer you a resource. So in this first episode, we're really going to be kind of just introducing ourselves and then going over what to expect from future episodes in the podcast. So we're going to go ahead and start with introductions. So I actually started in education and I came to instructional design after 8 years of being a classroom teacher in a K through 12 environment. I've always loved instruction and curriculum, and as a teacher, that was always my thing. And then luckily, I got even more exposure to that when the pandemic hit. So when the pandemic hit, everything kind of got turned upside down, and I got thrown into creating engaging and innovative instruction for online learners, which kind of made me go into more of the instructional design role. I got a degree in curriculum and instruction, and then now I am here. So that's kind of my background.
Yeah. Well, as I said, I'm Kelsey. I have spent my entire career in higher education, but I kind of came to instructional design in a roundabout way. I actually began in textbook publishing. So a lot of my thinking and planning was for not like one specific subject, but thinking about like how do you make learning work for biology? How does that look different when you're doing composition? And alongside of the textbooks, we also did courseware design. So that's really where I got my exposure to instructional design. That's what got me interested in it. Because a lot of times what you're trying to do is you have to have a lot of front-end analysis. You've got to know who your learners are, what your objectives are, before you invest money and spend and build a product. And so I actually went and got my master's in learning design and technology. And now I feel very fortunate to focus on that full time here at LSC.
So when we talk about the purpose of this podcast, we kind of told you already kind of what inspired this. But to kind of go further on that, when Kelsey and I were thinking about kind of what the purpose of this podcast should be, we thought about all the times that we Google instructional design or instructional practices, and the same 5 things pop up.
Right.
And they're not always things that go into super great detail about or application. And so when we were thinking about how this podcast could really be purposeful, that's kind of where we're getting our inspiration from.
Right. We really wanted to create more of a resource toolkit. So each of the episodes focuses on something very specific, with the intention that you're going to use what you need, and hopefully kind of put it into practice pretty quickly.
Yeah, like a buffet style. Yeah. So you have the ability to take these things that we're talking about and really apply them to all sorts of subjects. We don't want it to be super centralized to specific disciplines. It's more for everyone.
Right. And I would say that we're also putting a little bit more focus on online learning.
Yeah. Well, we should, obviously, because online learning is ever evolving. So even the way that we all learned online in our undergrads and our master's programs are completely different to what's out there now for online learning and students who are learning online. So, yeah.
Okay. All right. So now we kind of want to shift gears and talk a little bit about what to expect from the rest of the podcast episodes. When we first started planning, we sort of threw out all of these ideas. It was very disorganized. But we ended up landing on basically 4 domains that we see in practice. And that's how we're going to organize around a little mini-series for this first year. So those 4 domains are engagement, diverse learners and like how to serve diverse learners, course architecture, so that gets more into like the nitty-gritty of building and designing. And then the last one is tools and media. So let's talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so our first series is going to be engagement, which is so important specifically in an online space when you're not physically sitting there in the classroom. So for this mini series, we decided to really focus on instructional models mainly. So what are some different instructional models like inquiry and problem-based learning, project-based learning, and then also boosting the instructor presence online.
Right. And looking at your learners specifically, we wanted to talk about serving different learner modalities in online spaces. A lot of times you hear like auditory learning and visual learning, but how do you serve kinesthetic learning? How do you do social learning in an online space? So we're going to take a look at that. We're also going to take a look at the lens of accessibility, so both in terms of the technical side of accessibility, but also looking at like content creation and making that accessible for your students. And then lastly, looking at building online community as well.
And then we're going to get into, like Kelsey said, the nitty gritty. So actual design of your course. Right. So for that series, again, there's so many different things that we had on our list that we could have talked endlessly about. But the things that we pulled out that we thought that would be very applicable to most disciplines would be backwards design model thinking, transparent design of your assignments. So making sure that your student is very clear on their expectations and all of that. And then lastly, looking at quality matters and spotlighting some of those areas that will better improve your course.
Right, because those are like the big ideas that we use to organize all of the smaller components that we're going to be talking about.
And we also are fully aware that as educators, you probably already have somewhere to start, or at least like a course already kind of designed a little bit. So when we're looking at quality matters, it's just a way to improve what you already have.
Right. And then lastly, we mentioned we're going to talk about tools and media. So we've decided not to talk about specific tools because there are so many. But instead, we're going to think about the reflective practices that we use in evaluating tools. So like if you have a particular objective you want to achieve in your course, what questions do you need to be asking when you're looking at all of these different tools? We're going to be looking at visual design and how to bring that into both the course and assignments, and also looking at resources like OER, Open Educational Resources. So really there's kind of a lot of different things we're going to unpack over this next year.
Yeah. So that kind of leads us into the last part of our podcast, which is going to be kind of a shameless plug for instructional design here at Lone Star College. So instructional design services are a free service to any type of instructor here at Lone Star. So whether you're a full-time faculty or an adjunct, you have the ability to actually meet with us and have us help you in the things that you want to accomplish in your course. And so to do that, it's really easy. You just have to go to VTAC and to vtac.lonestar.edu and submit a ticket. And then you can meet with us. We are all centrally located, so we meet primarily through WebEx and phone, but there's other ways that you can reach out to us as well.
Right. So with that, we just want to thank you for listening to our first podcast. Please click we don't know what to click the like, subscribe, like where is it going to be? If you have questions or comments, please feel free to leave them below. What else do we need to say, Madison? And with that, we want to thank you for listening to the first episode of Bright Ideas Podcast and spending this time with us. Please feel free to leave any comments or questions below. We'll be sure to get back with you. And with that, please like and subscribe. The end.